Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our January 29th, 2024 regular council meeting. I will now call our meeting to order. May I have a mover? Moved by Councillor Dunstall, seconded by Councillor Martin. All those in favor? That carries unanimously. We do have a few moments of reflection tonight. On Saturday, January the 27th, it was the International Holocaust Remembrance Day. We did actually do a flag lowering at the township at 8:30 with some council members and myself and some staff. I did just want to note, because I know not everyone watches our budget meeting, so I did want to make note of that day and that we remember the over 6 million victims of the atrocities of the Holocaust. And of course, most of these were Jewish victims, and we're seeing today a rise of anti-Semitism, and remembering and learning from our history is very important. We also, today is the National Day of Remembrance for the Quebec City Mosque attack and Action Against Islamophobia Day. And on January 29th, 2017, 6 people lost their lives in a Quebec City mosque. And the township's flags were lowered again today to half-mast to recognize this solemn anniversary. And of course, anti-Semitism is seeing reverence again in our population. Again, it's very important, I think, for us to all reflect independently on past actions and how we can move forward. Also, I wanted to note that there was a passing of one of our local veterans. On January 25th, New Hamburg's most senior military veteran, Joseph Henry Connolly, passed away at the age of 100. We do send our condolences to Joseph's family, and I understand although Joseph was not able to attend our most recent Remembrance Day on November 11th, he was able to visit downtown New Hamburg to see the Legion banner that featured his photo and was dedicated to his service. So our condolences to his family. I will now turn it over to Councillor Wilkinson for the territorial land acknowledgement.
Thank you. We have gathered in Wilmot Township on the traditional territory of the neutral Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, and Mississauga peoples. And we also want to acknowledge the importance of the Dish with One Spoon Covenant, a peace agreement made between Indigenous nations before the Europeans arrived. It characterizes our collective responsibility to each other and Mother Earth, that we should take only what we need, leave enough for others, and keep the dish clean. By acknowledging this covenant and the First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people, we are reminded of our important connection to this land where we live, learn, and work together as a community.
Thank you. We have a few additions to the agenda. That is items 8.5, which is correspondence, item 9.2, which is a pre-budget approval we'll get to later on this evening, item 11.3, which is a bylaw, and item 11.4, which is also a bylaw. With the additions to the agenda, may I ask for a mover and seconder to adopt the agenda? Moved by Councillor Cressman, seconded by Councillor Dunstall. All those in favor? That carries unanimously. Does anybody have a disclosure of pecuniary interest under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act? Councillor Dunstall.
Thank you, through you, Mayor. I'm not sure, but I'm going to be diligent about it. For the Canada Day, for that vote, I will just recuse myself for that.
Very good. On to minutes of the previous meeting. The minutes that we have are January 15th, 2024 regular council meeting. The motion be that they be adopted as presented. May I have a mover? Moved by Councillor Martin, seconded by Councillor Dunstall. Does anybody have comments, questions, concerns? Seeing none, all those in favor? That carries unanimously. We do not have any delegations this evening. We do have multiple items of correspondence, for 5 items of correspondence, that is. Did anybody want to make comment? Councillor Martin?
Through you, Mayor Salonen, I would like to pull one letter, the correspondence from Nith Valley Eco Boosters.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, as in, go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead and make your comments on that item.
Thank you. I actually, first of all, have a question, wondering if we could get an update on where staff is at regarding the process of negotiations and working on the issue.
I will turn that over our manager of planning, or, yes, okay, Mr. Martin.
Right. To your Mayor Solomon. So staff have continued to work with the City of Waterloo. It's my understanding that there's an additional meeting tomorrow which should provide some resolution to those issues. Provided that meeting goes as anticipated, then we would plan to return to the February 12th meeting with a report and recommendations for Council's consideration.
Thank you, through you, Mayor Salonen. Thank you, Mr. Martin, for that update. And I appreciate the work that staff is doing. I wanted to say publicly that sometimes we actually have received a lot of letters on this one. I know my count is well over 350 letters. And I know sometimes there's innuendos or inferences or direct accusations that we're not doing enough, be it council or staff, and I want to express my public appreciation for what staff is doing. So thank you for your work on that. I also want to say that in some of the letters, there are many letters where the tone is simply factual and people are expressing concern and stating their opinions, which is what needs to happen. Sometimes there are personal references which I would say aren't very helpful. I promise to be professional and respectful in my interaction, and I would ask people that when they're doing that with us, that they not make personal insults, and if they want to talk about the issue, that it be done in respectful ways. So.
Thank you for your words, Councillor. I would agree very much with that sentiment. Councillor Dunstall.
Thank you, through you, Mayor. I do have a question, but I did want to echo that, and this was something that I did wanted to address. I want to thank the Township of Wilmot for doing your job. It hasn't been easy. I wanted to make sure I looked up the word vitriol because I wanted to make sure it accurately portrayed what I saw occur on this. And the definition is cruel and bitter criticism, and that word fit quite well. Most were respectful, but sharing their concerns. However, there were those whose vitriol was unacceptable. It's unfortunate that social media has become a platform for so much misinformation. And through it all, you kept looking for a solution. You kept looking for an opportunity to make sure that the taxpayers were taken care of, while balancing the wants and the needs of our community. That's your job. You did it well. Thank you very much. Now my question is, there has been a rumor that the land will be developed, or that we're holding off because there will be a development on that land, and I was wondering if you could address that. Thank you.
Director Krafka.
Through you, Mayor Salonen, to Councillor Dunstall. I've seen that rumor, and it's false. Certainly, the reporting of that concern was a bit of a surprise, given that the individuals involved in speaking to that concern were active participants in the development of the Laurel Creek ESL policies within the regional plan, within the township plan. Those policies that were developed, again, I think about 10 years ago, I don't know the exact date, those are what protect these lands for the very long term. Regardless of ownership, those lands are protected from development. These applications essentially are removing the estate residential value prior to the donation, and it's a perfectly acceptable process. That's what we're processing right now. But the applications are not necessarily about creating policies to preserve those lands. Those lands, in a policy fashion, in the ROP, in the Township OP, are already protected from the long term. And you know, obviously many of the individuals in that neighborhood were an active part of creating those policies to ensure that long-term preservation. So in answer to your question, no, the lands are not at risk of being acquired and developed, you know, as notwithstanding their location adjacent to the City of Waterloo.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dunstall. Councillor Wilkinson.
Thank you. Through the chair, I'd echo the same comments that my colleagues have mentioned here. Obviously a very hot topic, very heated topic, and a lot of interest from a variety of parties. But I would echo, I think there's a lot of misinformation floating around, and I would appreciate it if the parties that wish to engage in and use the services of this township would make sure that they're doing so in a factual manner when they're going out to the public. I mean, there's a number of issues at hand here, and, you know, just to sort of start it off, it's an incredible piece of property, incredible land. I've used it myself, bring my kids there. It's biologically diverse, and just as Director O'Craft was just mentioning, part of the Laurel Creek headwaters, and, you know, significant recharge area for the Waterloo Moraine. But there are a number of issues at hand that need to get sorted out, and I will wait for our staff to come back with professional advice. Also hope to take in legal advice and also further advice from our insurance provider. But ultimately, I hope the public would understand that there's a duty on our end, and truthfully, we have a fiduciary duty to protect the financial well-being of this township and prevent us from putting ourselves in a position of liability, which is ultimately what we're looking at here. So I'm sure every taxpayer and citizen would respect that when we're looking at something, we don't want to just make an irresponsible or negligent decision that could potentially jeopardize the future standing and position of the township while looking at this issue. So collect all the information. Please call us if you have questions, chat with us, and we'd be happy to explain further. But again, knowing that there's a report coming, I'll save some of my other comments for discussion at that time. But I'm glad that my colleagues chose to bring this up, because ultimately we need to make sure we're doing what's right, and would encourage everyone to work together on this matter.
Thank you very much, Councillor Wilkinson. Any other correspondence that people want to pull? Councillor Wilkinson?
Through the chair, we could have a brief conversation regarding item 8.1 from the Association of Ontario Road Supervisors. The letter itself brought to my attention, obviously, some of their concerns regarding recruitment and upcoming staffing needs in this profession. So certainly don't have to do it today by any means, but I think maybe if the group or my colleagues here are open to it, I wouldn't mind having this motion put on our next agenda and forwarding a formal letter to the government.
Very well. Clerk, is there anything formal that needs to be done in that regard?
Through you, Mayor, no. I'll reach out to the councillor and we'll do a notice motion.
Very good. Thank you. Any other correspondence that people want to make note of tonight? Okay, seeing not. On our consent agenda items, we have items 9.1 and 9.2. Now I recognize Councillor Dunstall that 9.2 you have a conflict with, so we'll vote first on item 9.1, which is the trail maintenance agreement with the region of Waterloo. May I have a mover to get this on the floor? Moved by Councillor Martin, seconded by Councillor Cressman. This is a consent item. Would anybody like to pull it to speak to it? Seeing none, I'll call the vote. All those in favor? That carries unanimously. And item 9.2, which is the ratification of the pre-budget approval for the Canada Day event expenses. Also a consent agenda item. May I have a mover to get this on the floor? Moved by Councillor Sadhu, seconded by Councillor Cressman. Anybody want to pull this item to speak to it? Councillor Wilkinson.
Thank you. Through the chair, I did just have a brief question here, and more so just sort of refresh my memory. I believe when we initially spoke of this, there was an upset limit of $10,000. And then I think potentially through the budget meetings that we still haven't obviously resolved, we may have seen a higher budgeted number. Just wondering if you could provide some brief clarification on that, what the actual spending amount we're aiming to spend here, please.
Through you, Mayor Sullivan, to Councillor Wilkinson, from a council report last year to deal with Canada Day, there was an upset limit of $25,000, and that $25,000 that was brought forward for the 2024 budget deals with fireworks and other entertainment that we would secure, and try to do that in advance, because obviously we need to do that well out in advance as well.
Through the chair, my apologies. That was my mistake. Then I think I made a mistake writing down the number initially.
Through you, Mayor Sullivan, to Councillor Wilkinson, you were correct, because there is, I think we broke it down in the council report where there was 10,000 sort of ballpark for fireworks, and then supplemented the rest of the funds for vendors and entertainment that we would have for the event.
Councillor Martin.
Through you, Mayor Salonen, it's my understanding that some people are interested in fundraising for this, so I thought that there's a hope that this money can be recouped. That's what I'm hearing, but I don't know if other people want to comment on that.
Director Catania.
Through you, Mayor Salonen, to Councillor Martin, yes, the candidate committee has been struck, so there will be opportunities there to take a look at potential fundraising, but I think just to get ourselves started, we wanted to make sure that from a municipal perspective, we were able to secure a few contracts in advance.
As well as I do know that we put in an application for federal funding for celebrations as well, so hopefully we will see those get approved as well. Any other questions or comments on this item, councillors? Seeing none, just a reminder, Councillor Dunstall's not voting. All those in favor? That carries unanimously. On to reports. We have two reports this evening. 10.1, the recommendation is that at its February 12th, 2024 meeting, Township of Wilmot Council declare portions of Peel Street, Burn Street, and Mill Street road allowance and described in report DS 2024-01 as surplus lands, and that the mayor and clerk be authorized to execute an agreement under the Section 40 of the Planning Act to eliminate the requirement for the offset parking of the proposed redevelopment of 183 Mill Street as described in report DS 2024-01, subject to the following. 1, that the perpendicular parking spaces within the Peel Street road allowance be reserved for use by 183 Mill Street. 2, that Link or any subsequent owner of 183 Mill Street be responsible for winter maintenance of the perpendicular parking and sidewalk located within the Peel Street road allowance. 3, that in consideration of this exemption, Link, A, make a payment as required under Section 40 bracket 2 or the Planning Act in the amount of $2. B, construct a parking lot at 73 Burn Street consisting of approximately 39 parking spaces to the specifications approved by the township through the site plan control process, with 13 of these spaces reserved for public use. And C, construct/mark 4 parallel parking spaces on Mill Street to the satisfaction of the township. To get this on the floor, may I have a mover? Moved by Councillor Martin, seconded by Councillor Cressman. I will now invite our Manager of Planning and Economic Development, Andrew Martin, to introduce the report.
Thank you, Mayor Salonen. As council is aware, Love Your Neighborhood Communities, or LINK, is proposing to redevelop and repurpose the former BW feed mill and New Hamburg Police Detachment properties with a mixed-use development consisting of approximately 3,800 square feet of commercial floor area and 31 rental apartments. As well, the former BW warehouse property on Burn Street would be redeveloped with a parking lot of approximately 39 parking spaces for both use by the Link site as well as the general public. Before you tonight, the report deals with two items. The first part being parking, and the second part is dealing with surplus and acquisitions related to road allowances surrounding the property. With respect to parking, prior to 2016, the New Hamburg core had parking exemptions for all uses. The businesses and residential units within the core existed, and it was at that time deemed appropriate that there was parking available throughout the core to accommodate those uses. Through a number of updates and reviews of parking in the core, an amendment was made to the Township zoning bylaw in 2016 to require that new developments provide parking at a rate of 50% for commercial or non-residential uses and at the full rate for residential. The proposal here before us would, if compliant with the bylaw, would require 1.5 parking spaces per residential unit. The commercial component, actually, when you look at the non-residential existing versus what's proposed, the new commercial is actually provides less square footage than the current non-residential use, so in which case there would not be any requirements for parking for the commercial components of the development. The ratio of 1.5 parking spaces per unit, which is contained in the Township zoning bylaw right now, is typically related to market type units. And this development is proposing a mixture of market, affordable, and geared to income units, and is anticipated to require much less parking than you'd see in a traditional apartment or condominium type complex. That's supported through some studies that the region's done with respect to parking related to affordable housing, and certainly Link has suggested the same with respect to what's proposed on this site. So in that regard, there's opportunities to look at ways to offset parking requirements or reduce parking requirements, and Section 40 of the Planning Act specifically provides that ability that council can enter into an agreement to fully exempt a site from parking or partially exempt, as the case may be. And it provides a provision for a payment in lieu of parking. In this instance, Link is proposing to redevelop the BW Feed warehouse site with 39 parking spaces and reserving 17 of those spaces for use by the general public. So from a staff perspective, we feel that the financial contribution towards parking is offset by them actually providing the parking in this location. As well, through reconstruction of Mill Street, removing the current loading dock, there's an opportunity to create 4 parallel parking spaces that don't exist on Mill Street right now. That would be available to the public. And along Peel Street, where it's currently open access to the mill, they're proposing to provide 6 perpendicular parking spaces, but requesting that those be reserved specifically for Link, providing accessible parking for the facility and just general use by the facility. And in lieu of making that available to the public, Link has indicated that they would maintain those parking spaces. So ultimately, the opportunity exists through an agreement to exempt the site entirely from providing parking, but we know that through the proposed redevelopment of the Burns Street lot, as well as the work within the road allowance, that they're actually creating 49 parking spaces for use by this facility as well as the general public. So there is that offset provision, and that addresses those concerns. So I certainly support that it's appropriate for this type of development to look at opportunities to reduce or exempt parking entirely, and certainly to facilitate this type of project in the core is deemed to be, a valuable proposition for the municipality. The second component that this report just touches on briefly and will be expanded upon at the February 12th meeting is related to surplus lands. So throughout surrounding the property on all streets, portions of that road allowance that exists today will actually be surplus to the needs of the road after the properties are realigned. So the municipality, through the site plan control process, will be acquiring some portions of the road allowance as widenings. So the existing loading facility on Mill Street that encroaches into the road would be removed, and that land would be restored to the road allowance. And there's other components that, once the property lines are adjusted, could be transferred to Link to round out their property lines. So the acquisition of land as road allowances can occur through the development approval process, through site plan control, whereas the disposition of surplus lands needs to go through the current process, which is set out by bylaw in the municipality. That requires 10 days notice prior to dealing with that, so the publishing of the agenda that included the recommendation, as well as this report, serves as that notice. So a more detailed report on the actual disposition process will be provided at the February 12th meeting. With all that said, staff are certainly excited to continue to work with Link on the process and feel like this agreement is certainly a significant step forward so they can proceed to site plan control to see this development go forward. And we're here to answer any questions, rather, should you have them.
Thank you very much, Mr. Martin. Councillor Cressman.
Yes, I was unclear I understand the parallel parking on Peel Street where the old loading dock used to be. I'm talking on Mill Street where the dump pit used to be, and it's got a single slope roof and a wall, and the trucks used to pull in there and unload their commodities into the pit. So I was unclear, is that actually street allowance? Is that the shaded area that is shown here, or is that going to be incorporated in the building plan, because it always was kind of added to the side of the main building?
Mr. Martin.
Through Mayor Salonen. I probably used the wrong terminology when I said removing the loading dock. So I was referring to the pit on Mill Street that you're talking about. So that piece is currently on what is Link's property. So it juts into the road allowance. So after it's removed, that land would then be acquired as a road allowance widening to provide the proper width along the street. So, and in that area provides the opportunity to create 4 parallel parking spaces on Mill Street. The perpendicular parking spaces are in the Peel Street side.
Councillor Dunstall.
Thank you, through you, Mayor. I'm sorry, how many spots were available for the public parking?
Through Mayor Salonen. So within the Burn Street lot, there would be 17 parking spaces based on the current proposal. That may be refined through the detailed site plan if less parking spaces were to be available through that design, but it's anticipated that's what it would be. On Mill Street, there would be 4 additional parallel parking spaces. And then the 6 spaces on Peel Street are proposed to be for Link's use only. So I guess that would work out to 21 parking spaces available to the public.
Thank you. I can hear our downtown businesses jumping up and down for joy. Thank you.
I was curious on the Burn Street parking lot. I see that there are the 2 accessible spaces, which is obviously required by the Disability Act. Are those spaces specifically for Link, or are those for the public, or how will that be distributed?
Thank you for the question, Mayor Salonen. So there is accessible parking provided on Peel Street that would be for Link's sole use. The accessible parking within the lot would be in the area that would be available to the public. So that row there that includes the accessible parking would be publicly accessible.
That's great to hear. Thank you very much. Councillor Martin.
Through you, Mayor Salonen, I want to thank you, Manager Martin, for your work on this. The word on the street is that you worked hard in the negotiations with Grand River Conservation Authority, and I realize there's extra implications in terms of the floodplain and all of that. To me, this is an exciting project. I think it contributes to affordable housing, and I think it's also a reuse of an old building, and I'm glad to see that. So in my mind, this is excellent, and I appreciate people from Link being here this evening.
Councillor Cressman.
Yes, one more question about the parking lot. Will there be any egress onto the laneway, or will it be strictly onto Burn Street? I don't see that from the site plan that it's, at least I interpret that saying it's strictly to Burn Street. Is that correct?
Through Mayor Salonen. So at this point, some of those details would be further worked out through the site plan control process. The concept provides access only to Burn Street. Just it then directs pedestrians to the actual crossing at the intersection of Burns and Mill, as opposed to mid-block crossing. And also, just given the nature of that lane, some of the upgrades that may be required if it were to be used further for public access is seemed maybe to be cost prohibitive for the development. So by providing access only out to Burn Street, it limits the use of that lane. So the current proposal is to not provide access to that lane.
Any other questions on this, councillors? Seeing none, I'll call the vote. All those in favor, and that carries unanimously. On to report 10.2, which is the removal of holding symbol at 66 Hinks Street in New Hamburg. And the recommendation is that council approve the request made by 66 Hinks GP Incorporated to remove a holding symbol affecting parking lot 38 plan 1552 and part of lot 7 plan 532A, municipally known as 66 Hinks Street, New Hamburg. To get this on the floor, may I have a mover? Moved by Councillor Cressman, seconded by Councillor Dunstall. I will now call back on Mr. Martin.
Thank you, Mayor Salonen. Very briefly, this application was subject to a zone change process that was approved earlier in 2023. At that point, one of the outstanding matters was the completion of a record of site condition for the development. So that has now been completed. We've received the clearance from the Ministry of Environment, Climate and Parks. So by removing the holding provision, it allows the development to proceed to the site plan approval stage and ultimately, hopefully, building stage later in 2024.
Thank you. Any questions or comments on this, councillors? Seeing none, I'll call vote. All those in favor? And that carries unanimously. As for bylaws, we have just one moment. Very good. So the recommendation is that bylaws 2024-04, 2024-05, and 2024-06, as attached to this agenda, be read a first, second, and third time, and finally passed in open council. May I have a mover? Moved by Councillor Dunstall, seconded by Councillor Martin. All those in favor? Oh, sorry, Councillor Wilkinson.
Sorry, through the chair, I wanted to actually, when I'm looking at item 11.3, which is 2024-05 regarding water and wastewater rates, just to my knowledge, we've yet to actually see the proposed changes in water and wastewater rates. And additionally, the bylaw is backdated to January 1st. I mean, that date has passed. So I was just curious what exactly we're looking at passing here when we don't have any set rates, to my knowledge.
I will turn it over to Mr. Elliott, who I believe is online.
Thank you. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Excellent, thank you. The discussion at budget, the budget package included the discussion with respect to proposed water rate and sanitary rate. And so those were part of the budget discussion. As we went through the engineering section, we did touch on water, and arising from that, we wanted to get the water rates on the agenda for council. And we spoke of that during the meeting, that we would be raising those rates to budget committee, to council tonight. So the agenda has the bylaw in it with the rates that do full cost recovery from the charges from the region of Waterloo, as well as the operational costs required for the two different services.
Councillor Wilkinson.
Through the chair, I do see that. I guess my concern is more so, I was looking for a report back in the past. We've seen sort of a comparison year over year to show what the percentage increase is, just so that we have essentially an understanding of what the increase will be on water rates this year in a percentage. I do see the table detailing the rates, but again, what kind of percentage are we passing on here? What has the change been? And I realize that it's a straight cost recovery based on the wholesale rate, but what can I tell folks when they're looking at their rates?
Just flipping through my budget binder materials in front of me. Through you, Madam Chair, the water rate increased. It's detailed on page 118 of your budget materials. The water rate is on the volumetric side is increasing 3.52%, and the sanitary sewer is just under 4% at 3.96%. Then the basic services for a 1-inch or the smallest water meter is increasing by $11 per year. Increasing by $11 to $130 per year, just over $10 a month.
Did that answer your question?
Through the chair, thank you. I do recall seeing a report on the water rates, but perhaps what I'm looking for in the future, and this is a conversation for potentially an item coming, but seeing a more formalized report that would detail out exactly what those percentage increases would look like, so that we can have that information readily available.
Okay.
Through you, Madam Chair, we'd be happy to add something to our website that further explains those rate changes and the percentages, the impacts to the families. We'll share it with council as well.
Very good. CAO Chambers.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor. There is a requirement for water systems to do financial planning, and it's a legislative requirement. I think it would benefit us to bring a report back to council on this. The existing financial plan predates my arrival here, so I don't have a lot of information about how it was developed. But certainly, there has been discussion over the past year that it would be appropriate to update our rate study. And the rate study is intended to look at the capital expenditures required and the operational expenditures required for the system over time and develop rate recommendations based on meeting those future system requirement needs. And I do believe that it is time for an update on that. So there would be an update provided to council through that additional rate study.
Does that answer your question, Councillor Wilkinson? Okay. Any other questions then before I call the vote? Okay, seeing none. All those in favor? That carries unanimously. And then for bylaw 2024-03, the motion would be that this be read for a first time tonight, and then at a following meeting, it'll be read for a second and third time. May I have a mover for that, please? Moved by Councillor Martin, seconded by Councillor Sadhu. Any questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? And that carries unanimously. On to notices of motion. We have two this evening. The first one is from Councillor Wilkinson, and I will turn him over to introduce his motion.
Thank you. Through the chair. Well, pretty straightforward. I mean, the recommendation, I won't bore everyone by reading through it as last time, but in essence, what I'm looking for here is when we were going through our budget report, every department provided over a initial cover page that sort of outlined key accomplishments, goals set for next year, as well as key performance indicators, and just a general commentary on challenges, staffing, and so on and so forth. So the intention with this motion is to provide greater transparency to the public regarding our current operations. I know given that in some cases, citizens have potentially been caught off guard by the sudden appearance of reports or projects on agendas, and understanding that we are currently facing a somewhat challenging financial position, I feel it would be prudent to ask for and receive a quarterly report from each department on their activities, goals, KPIs, year-to-date budget spends, variance analysis included in that as well. And really just intended to give the public greater transparency in our township operations. In addition to that, looking at having the Office of the CAO report to Council weekly on items for information that could potentially be confidential in nature, or just general attention needs to be put on it. So that just sort of more so formalizing that request. And then the final piece of this was asking the clerk's office to explore the potential. I know we have a great calendar tool on our website that posts the agendas, but looking for a step further here and ask them to provide a dashboard or a document of some sort that they can update and the public can have access to, that would provide sort of a summary of items upcoming on agendas. So again, if there's questions or citizens wish to delegate on the matters, they can plan appropriately, as opposed to just having to wait for the agenda, then potentially not having the time to make proper arrangements. So happy to answer any questions that anyone may have, but really, ultimately, at the end of the day, just trying to increase the transparency of our operations.
Councillor Dunstall.
Thank you.
Sorry, actually, before that, I would need a seconder. Yes, my apologies. Seconded by Councillor Sadhu. Now, Councillor Dunstall.
Thank you, through you, Mayor. I just wanted to verify something. The KPIs, and I'm sure you're aware of this, a lot of times they can be made up of various amounts of different varying targets that they have to meet. Some of those may be things that you want to share, and some of them may not. I think we have to be concerned about employee performance being put out there. So my question to you is if you would be willing to make sure that the KPIs that would be reported on would be specific KPIs and not in its entirety. There are times, especially for management, that part of their KPIs may be about their employees. So I just want to make sure that those things would be kept out and that it would be things that would be directly pertinent to the public.
Through the chair, I hear you. I'm not asking for KPIs on performance of employees, but rather the department as a whole. And looking at the budget detail sheet that was provided over, it's, how many applications are we processing? How many, some of the things that we were seeing there where they just simply were providing statistics that would indicate the activity within the department, I think is perfectly reasonable, but certainly not looking to identify any staff, which would, we don't receive any information on staff performance outside of a closed session anyway.
Right, exactly, and I just wanted to make sure if we were asking them to supply us with their KPIs, I just wanted to make sure that it was something that was more transactional and not in the bigger ether of the world out there. So, thank you.
Councillor Cressman.
I guess through you, Mayor, first to our CAO, do you have any estimate how much additional time this will require on our directors? And I'll make some comments subsequent to your reply.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor, to Councillor Cressman. I haven't had the opportunity to have a detailed discussion with staff about this because we did just receive this motion prior to the issuance of the agenda on Wednesday, and as you know, we had a full-day council meeting or a budget meeting on Thursday and as well as Saturday, so we really haven't had an internal discussion around the resources required. There would be additional resources required to support this ask. We currently do not have resources to support the development of this. As you know, our budget document evolved this year, and we did the best we could to put the document together within the time period that we had, and we tried to identify some KPIs through that. The KPIs that we picked were sort of arbitrary because not every department at this time measures KPIs, and in my experience, we would develop appropriate KPIs through our strategic planning process. So in order to ensure that we as staff are measuring things that are appropriate towards the goals that council has set for us, I would typically see those priorities set through the strategic plan and identified through the strategic planning process. And then out of that strategic planning process, it was our intent to build out and further enhance our business planning, our annual business planning, our reporting back. And so I would suggest that based on the status of our current strategic plan, which was done prior to my arrival and which I find very granular, being honest, it's more task-oriented than being strategic in nature. Those priorities and goals really have not been established. So I think there would be a bit of work on staff's side to develop these in a meaningful way that would be useful to council. And just looking, at the timeline that was suggested here, that we would develop this and be prepared to report back in the first quarter, I don't believe we would be able to do that. I think if we look at the fact that we had our budget meeting on Thursday, we've received significant direction from council to report back on a number of issues before the end of February. Staffing resources, the 0.5% reduction across the board. I would be concerned about our ability to deliver on this. But I fully agree, these are excellent goals for us to have, and we should be working towards them. Just, I think we have some groundwork to do before we're able to get to that.
Councillor Cressman, you said you had follow-up?
Yes, I guess the question that I had is trying to get my governance training from boards, which I've sat in likely multiple days on multiple boards, where a board's responsibility goes through to the CAO or the general manager, who then is the one that gives direction to staff and holds staff accountable. And I think that's where I was asking some questions of HR and the developing plans that we were looking at internally to assist directors who ultimately report to the CAO in terms of accountability, and then the CAO's accountability is to the council. So I'm just trying to figure out the similarities or the differences, and whether this is kind of an end run around that as compared. I think part of the other motion that's on the table tonight, I spent I spent significant time in Woolwich's budget and looking at some of their high-level goals, and then the work plans that dropped out of that as things. And again, I identify what you're saying in terms of looking at a strategic plan that identifies your goals, and then the work plan that items that fall out of that for this year, maybe ones that are 2 years off or 3 years off. And then the whole farm vernacular, I don't want to put the cart ahead of the horse. I don't want to create work for the sake of work, but I want it as, I can understand the goal that is being trying to be achieved. It's just the timing of that as we look down the road.
CAO Chambers.
So in terms of your comments around governance, I think what you've identified were more internal-facing things, and I believe what the councillor is requesting are those sort of outward-facing, reporting back on our performance around our strategic goals and what we're doing. And I definitely think there's value in that, and that we should be working towards developing that system to be able to report back. I would just think that within the timeline requested, we would not have sufficient resources to do so, and I would like an opportunity to take this back to the team to identify what resources would be required in order to achieve this, and an appropriate timeline to be able to achieve this. We just have not had time to discuss this since this issue was brought forward.
Councillor Martin.
Through you, Mayor Salonen, I appreciate the comments that are being made so far. I'm wondering if there is some way that we could find a negotiating mechanism to talk about how to move forward. I appreciate your comments, Councillor Cressman, in terms of asking questions about it, and so I'm in hearing what you're saying, CAO Chambers. I think that timing is important. I realize, Councillor Wilkinson, that you're asking for transparency, and of course that's important. That's an important issue. But I also worry about the timing. It to me seems like an onerous task in a short period of time, shifting in a direction that maybe has not been a practice in the past, and so how can we move in a direction? So I would be interested in staff's input on this, and so my recommendation would be to give time for CAO Chambers for you to discuss with directors and managers or whomever you would want to include what is a reasonable time frame and how can we work on this. So that's more the direction that I'm thinking about.
So is that a request for a deferral of motion?
I don't know.
Pending staff report?
I realize in council, I don't always have a motion right away. I'd like to think out loud. And so I'm putting a thought forward, wondering if there can be a bit of discussion. I hear from the Integrity Commissioner that it's important that we have discussions in the open, and so I don't necessarily want to move to a motion before having some discussion. But maybe I'm not following procedure, and if I'm not, I can be reprimanded, and I can certainly put forward a motion.
I'm not looking to reprimand anyone. I believe Councillor Wilkinson would like to say something, so we'll go to him and let the discussion continue.
Sure. Through the chair, I certainly appreciate where my colleagues are coming from. I think the spirit of this, truthfully, is looking at it from a few perspectives. I mean, let's face it, we're in an incredibly challenging financial position. I think lack of transparency and oversight has led the general population to believe that for years we were much better off than we were. So going through a couple budgets now, and as well seeing the current position we're in, I think more of this from a business perspective. If this was a private organization, which is how I believe we should be run, or try and adhere to be closer to the way a private organization is run, this would be information that could be provided within a day or two, and that would be the expectation. I certainly believe our staff work incredibly hard and do an excellent job. Do not get me wrong. My concern is that the speed at which government moves, I find incredibly frustrating. And out of the fairness to the people that own the township, the corporation of the Township of Wilmot, which is the people, the taxpayers, the citizens, they should have every right to have transparency and insight into how we are operating. While the directors do flow up to the CAO, I don't think it's unreasonable for a council that's elected to represent citizens to have information like this available, because it helps drive our decision-making and also our ability to hold the corporation accountable to what's happening. So I'd be happy to entertain pushing this off 2 weeks and hearing staff opinion back or the CAO's opinion back, but quite frankly, this should be something that should be easily implemented and should not require the additional resources, in my opinion, that are being asked. I do believe that this is something that could be put together when it's looked at from a quarterly standpoint.
CAO Chambers.
I appreciate that, Councillor. As I said, I would like an opportunity to work with the team to discuss what resources would be required. Just looking at the most immediate priorities that have come forward from council, even in the last week and through the budget process, we've got a reporting back on by the CAO's office on staffing resources, reallocating staffing resources to provide increased support to council, and reallocating resources within the CAO's office on communications. We've got direction to reduce 0.5% across the board for all of staff by all departments by the end of budget, which we indicated would be an analysis of service levels, and so that would be a reporting back by each director, and we'll be working on that in February. In addition, we've got the Prime Minister's Path report that's been directed to come back by the end of February, which would be coming out of my department as well. We've got a request to report back on the strategic plan and deferral of that, which we would have to bring back this month and prior to the end of budget as well, and looking at how we could resource that in-house. And in addition to that, I also have other obligations with the regional CAO group and the planning heads around additional planning for the download of planning through Bill 23. So there are significant priorities that are coming out of my office, in addition to other projects that may be of a confidential nature that I'm not able to discuss. So I would suggest that there is a significant workload on the plate for the office of the CAO, and I would request additional time to bring that back, or perhaps a discussion among council about whether we could deprioritize any of those things if council feels that this is of a higher priority.
Councillor Martin?
In listening to this conversation, I'm ready to put forward a motion that we change the timing to the end of May, that we give staff time to work on the projects that CAO Chambers has mentioned, you've got a significant list there. And that list is one that we've been publicly talking about in terms of what needs to be worked on. But this direction, the request for transparency, the idea of having some kind of quarterly report that we hear from staff, and that by the end of May we could reach a decision on how to address the quarterly report.
Just to clarify, so you want to defer this motion until the end of May pending the staff report on their ability to provide these outcomes? Is that what you're asking for? Yeah. Is there a seconder for that motion? Seconded by Councillor Dunstall. Councillor Cressman, was that a question leaning forward? Yes.
Yes, this is, I'm going to ask this of the clerk through you, Mayor. On a deferral, do you get to debate it, or do you, a tabling motion, I know Robert says you table and no discussion, you call the vote, so I'm just trying to get the direction here.
Through you, Mayor, you're one step ahead of me. So now that a deferral's been moved, the debating is only on the timing of the deferral itself. So right now, really the question becomes, is council satisfied with the May timeline, or is there another timeline? But that's what you'd be debating at this point. And if you want to continue the debate on the motion itself, then you would vote against the deferral. And that would reopen the original question. Thank you.
Councillor Dunstall.
Thank you, through you, Mayor. CAO Chambers, April work for you? Or May, I'm asking.
I would prefer May if possible. I think we've got a significant amount of work to do to get through this budget and, start to issue RFPs and get the work out the door after the budget is approved. And so I would appreciate some additional time.
So would we be looking at the beginning of May, end of May? Because then we're in the second quarter.
Yeah, I would appreciate the end of May if possible.
Thank you.
Councillor Sadhu.
Just a quick question. So if we do move forward with this in May, Q3, when does Q3 start? Any idea? It starts in July. July? So theoretically, if it is voted in May, so we would get an update for Q3 as it stands right now?
If we come back with the report around what council is requesting and we get direction from council to do so, then that's what we would work to.
Councillor Wilkinson.
Through the chair. So I guess my concern here is that we're looking at getting a report back for this in May, which doesn't even necessarily mean that we're going to have the actual asks brought back forward until potentially some time after. Would it be agreeable? I mean, I understand that there's a substantial workload there, and I would agree there are some things that, yes, we have asked for priority back, but would it be reasonable or agreeable to potentially have a report back by the end of Q1 looking at implementing this and sort of working towards an end of Q2 initial report back? And let me clarify, through the chair, the initial report back being if this is approved at the end of Q1, we see our first report back at the beginning of Q3.
At this time, I think it's not possible for me to answer because I haven't taken this back to my team and had the discussion about the resources required and, their own priorities on when we can get this back. If council directs me to bring the report back sooner, I think the implementation timeline would be reported back within that report if it's sufficient for council. But as I said, we haven't even had an opportunity to have a discussion on this internally in terms of how we can resource this and what the timeline is. So in fairness, I'd be committing my team to something without even having a discussion with them on their ability to deliver that, and I would prefer not to do that.
Councillor Dunstall.
Thank you, through you, Mayor. If we went with the May deadline, then would the first report, which would be given in third quarter, be a year-to-date report? Would that be possible so that we could have all that information?
I think we're really starting to talk about a lot of hypotheticals that none of us have a crystal ball to see. I would ask that unless somebody has an issue with the May proposed timeline, that they want to see something different, I would call the vote on that. And then if that passes, we'll go with the May report back date. If it fails, we will go back to the conversation at hand.
Perfect.
So with that, I will call the vote. So just to be clear for everyone following along, this is a deferral, that this motion be deferred until, was it end of May, Councillor Martin, that you specified? Until end of May, pending a staff report on their ability to provide and what resources they would need to be able to fulfill the spirit of this motion. That has been seconded by Councillor Dunstall. So all those in favor? All those opposed? And that carries. On to our second motion, which is 12.2, and it is Councillor Sadhu's regarding the 2025 budget structure. I will turn it over to Councillor Sadhu.
Thank you very much. I'm not going to read through it all. Basically, just a summary of it. Moving forward, I'd like to see more transparency out of the budgeting process. We've come a long way since our last budget. Just in looking at Woolwich's budget, you see a line by line where I find it's easier to read, it's more transparent, and it helps identify areas of efficiencies. I believe it'll help staff with costing of their departments, and with council of looking through it and kind of getting an idea of where we can find, like I said, further efficiencies. I equate it to something like, if you're at a home, if you're in your home and you're doing your budgeting, sometimes it's easier if you write down line by line what you're spending on, as opposed to just looking at the big picture. And then when you do that, you can identify key areas of, holy smokes, I'm spending too much on this, that, or the other thing. So having said that, I would like to raise the motion that future budgets, mainly starting in 2025, be illustrated in more of a line-by-line basis, resembling something of which Woolwich has.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Is there a seconder for this motion? Seconded by Councillor Dunstall. And any comments or questions on this, councillors? Councillor Martin?
Through you, Mayor Salonen, it's something I've been thinking about. I did have a conversation with CFO Elliott and his experience, his previous experience in another municipality. The line-by-line budget, I think, is good in terms of giving more transparency, and it certainly is true. From last year to this year, we have a much better understanding of what our budget's about, and at the same time, I recognize there are still unknowns, things that we don't really know what all goes into a significant amount, be it $100,000 or be it $1 million, be it what's the breakdown. So I can appreciate that the breakdown's important. I'm wondering, though, do we want that breakdown at the time of the budget discussions? It's my understanding that in another municipality, instead of a line-by-line budget discussion, they would have each department, each year, one department would, in a finance committee, have line-by-line discussions in terms of their budget, and people can give input. And so I'm wondering, and again, I realize maybe I might be asked if I'm putting forward a motion, and I'm really putting forward a thought in this moment, but I'm willing to put forth a motion. And that is, the thought is, would there be an alternate practice such as line-by-line discussion in Finance Committee and not at the time of the budget?
Thank you, Councillor Martin. Councillor Cressman, you did have your hand up earlier.
Yes, I was going to ask that of interim treasurer Elliott, Director Elliott, about that. I guess I was wondering about, he's brought some innovative things to the table this year compared to what we dealt with last year. And I guess through you, Mayor, to the CEO, when is our hope in terms of a replacement for Treasurer Elliott? And I would like to really hear response from that individual and his input on what his suggestions would be. Maybe there's a better system than Woolwich around, I don't know. But it's just, I'd hate to have it pinned to one. There's things I like about Woolwich. There's things that I would say having a consolidated view and then ability to tap on and go to more detail, if required, would be something that would be interesting. Well, we're projecting this type of increase year over year in the big picture, and then if you wanted to more detail, you get a drop-down menu to get some more details. So I guess that asks the question of the CEO when ballpark of when we might have a permanent treasurer replacement.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor, to Councillor Cressman, thanks for reminding me of another priority that I have that I need to be working on. We have actually gone through a first round of hiring and or a first round of interviews and have gone back out, so we're gathering resumes again and creating a short list, and we'll be going into another round of interviews. So I would agree with you and having some discussion with our interim treasurer, Mr. Elliott, that, you know, we feel that it would be important to get the input of a new treasurer coming in around the systems that they would like to develop and perhaps additional ideas on how they could improve the budgeting process. I would agree that we've made some improvements and we certainly need to do more. But one of the things that I'd also like to recognize is that we talk a lot about how we've been modernizing and trying to update our systems and our internal processes. And interim director Elliott and I, or interim CFO Elliott and I, agree that there are definitely some systems improvements that would be required before we can really enhance and improve the information coming out of our budgeting process. As an example, budgeting software, updating our financial software, and you know, I would think the goal that Council is trying to achieve in terms of trying to go line by line is really to understand what are the costs of our service delivery. I would suggest to you right now, based on the systems that we have in place, we don't have good information to identify truly what the costs are of our service delivery. We aren't job costing through our payroll. We are not tracking our labor costs. And I think that there would be significant work around the systems to be able to provide the information that Council needs. And we certainly recognize that as a need. And so, you know, we have new staff on board, fresh eyes on this, and I think that we are going to be able to advance that. And I understand Council's frustration around wanting these things, wanting information. What I will tell you is that over the last 2 years, we've been working to bring on qualified staff to look at our systems across the organization to modernize and to be able to provide you with the information that you need in all of these areas. So we share your frustration around, you know, some of these issues that we're having. I once heard that, you know, we can rise to our goals, but we often fall to the level of our systems, and I think that's what's happening here. So we'd like to focus on improving those types of things and getting information from the new treasurers coming forward as we continue to develop our budgeting process.
Councillor Sidhu.
Well, it kind of surprises me, actually. I don't know how this township has gotten to this point when we don't know what we're spending on, how we're spending on, how much we're spending on it. I mean, being a business owner, I don't know how this township has been operating over the last 20 years. It kind of baffles me, really. Furthermore, I see it as, I understand, like there's going to be a new CFO coming in, but if we have the policies in place now, and it's something that this council is happy with, I don't think it would be out of the question for incoming CFO to be working within those parameters and start structuring a budget that is more line by line.
Councillor Wilkinson.
Through the chair, I echo what my colleague to the left of me here is suggesting. It is somewhat shocking to hear. I don't think we necessarily have to look at the Woolwich budget as the guide or the correct answer, but I think it's ultimately looking at detail at a granular level. The public, the people that we represent, are looking for transparency because we've come out and said we need to, pardon me, the staff has come out and said we need to look at a 10.6% budget increase on the whole, and we have to tell people why. And if we can't even get that level of detail to break down spending items and labor costs, it's no wonder we're in this spot. So this will provide council with the ability to further examine, look for efficiencies, be able to provide transparent information to the general public and ask for their input on improvements. I mean, my opinion heading into this year is we should have done a full assessment of every department line by line in all spending because quite frankly, given the position we're in, it's challenging and we need to do that. So I think this really speaks to transparency, and rather than hearing why it's not possible, I'm in support of this motion and in making it possible. So whatever it takes, this, much like how I feel about my previous motion that was deferred, this should be the priority. We need to examine our finances. We need to get information. We're operating as if we're a startup organization in the 1970s when in fact we're a township operating in 2024. It doesn't feel that way. So I'm in favor of this, and it's more so the expectation, in my opinion, versus waiting to hear what can and cannot be done.
Councillor Sadhu, I did have a question on your final, be it finally resolved. I'm just a little bit unclear on the direction that the motion will be giving, because it says that administration is directed to implement these changes in preparation of the 2025 budget, but then it goes on to say, and report back to council on the feasibility and challenges encountered and the proposed timeline for these changes. I'm just a bit confused because one seems we're saying, do this, and then the other saying, but let us know if you can actually do it and what the challenges might be.
Yeah, sorry, my fingers got a little carried away there. I should have proofread it more. It would be to direct and to implement these changes in preparation for the 2025 budget.
So would that be making an amendment to change that? Yes. Okay. Okay, Councillor Dunstall, do you agree with that as a friendly amendment, being the seconder to this?
I do.
Okay, very good. We'll take that as a friendly amendment. Okay, that clarifies my confusion over this. Thank you. And I mean, my comments would be, I certainly think, one, accounting for the fact that we're not private sector. I think we need to appreciate that government does not move at the pace that we all would love it to, but I do think the changes of staff over the last few years are very encouraging. And I do think that a line by line certainly would have been great to know before running in this role, where we were all thinking that the budget was great and learning that in fact it was not. Line by line would have made it a lot easier to see that we were taking out of reserves to pay for operational, which is not good business in my mind. But glad that we have competent staff in roles that are catching these things and providing that information. I don't see an issue with the line by line. I think it could certainly help with transparency. Councillor Martin, I see that you had a question.
Through you, Mayor Salonen, I thought my colleague, Councillor Cressman, was asking to hear from I always get stuck when I have to say somebody's name in their title. Interim Treasurer, Chief Financial Officer Dan Elliott. I could tell a story, but I probably shouldn't leave that for Councillor Cressman. Anyway, I was wondering if I could hear from Interim Treasurer, Chief Financial Officer Elliott in terms of your opinion on best practice.
Mr. Elliott.
Thank you, Madam Chair. With respect to going line by line, I think there are ways of avoiding that level of detail because that's when we're in the weeds. Some smaller municipalities, and we see it at Woolwich and a couple in North Dumfries, I believe, is doing the same thing line by line in the public domain. I have seen line by line in the public domain taken offline. Quite frankly, there's nothing confidential in our records that would stop anybody from asking for that line by line through an FOI. It would take a little while. It would be hundreds of pages long, but there's nothing stopping the public from asking for that type of information. The role in the budget is to ensure that we're headed in the right direction with the correct resources for each department. We've tried to do that this year. Line by line may have slowed it down, but I'm used to having it rolled up. I think the notion of having the new treasurer come in and bring their perspectives to it, as well as our new system. We're looking at a new financial system that includes not just the financials, but the budgeting and hopefully job costing capabilities, perhaps even integrated HRIS. This new system will be able to, or hopefully can drive a system such as the one that I believe it was Councillor Martin you mentioned, where you can, here's the rolled up numbers, but if you really want the detail, click on it and it opens up. I have seen those systems in demonstrations before, and they are fabulous when you're doing budget reviews, because to develop a budget and present it in a useful fashion for the public and for the council, you need to roll them up a little higher than how much am I spending on my office supplies. And when I put in conference numbers, what conferences are you planning on going to? So, that's available, but I think this motion might be a little bit premature as a professional to the next guy in my chair or the next person in my chair. I would suggest that give them a voice and also allow them to find a system that might be able to achieve what you're looking for, and then report back on and consult with you before he or she produces and goes ahead to design the budget package for you for next year.
Thank you, Mr. Elliott. Councillor Cressman?
Yes, unfortunately, I think I heard about a third of that. It seems like there's enough of an echo, and and it might be my years of farming that have contributed to my hearing loss. I better not go what the other possibility would. My wife wouldn't appreciate that, but all to say, I guess it leads me I think I caught enough of it to say that waiting for the new appointed treasurer to give his opinion on this, as well as a review of our internal systems and whether we have the software to get the job done. I think that's kind of what I'm hearing both from our CAO and from you. So, but I think the intent of getting additional information in a timely fashion I don't think any of us would vote against.
Councillor Wilkinson?
Through the chair, picking up on what you're saying, Councillor Cressman, I can certainly understand the reasons behind wanting to maybe ask the incoming or whoever the incoming treasurer may be, but I think it goes back to, again, I want to maybe clarify where my comments were coming from before. It's that It's not so much wanting to hear the opinion of the staff in this case, but it's more so the expectation of council and the public that we get the information we're asking for. So again, I think the spirit here, if that's somewhat part of the debate, is truthfully, it's that this is the expectation, and I'm inclined to think that this would be more than reasonable to ask. Again, I think financial information should be forefront and help drive decision-making. But if we're simply not getting it, then if we're not getting it and the public aren't seeing it, and it would take a massive FIO request to even get it, then what are we using to make our internal decisions, which to me is concerning. So I think setting this as an expectation will be a massive step forward in seeing us run at a greater efficiency and have better financial data to help guide us long term and make sure that we can set up to be successful and healthy in the future moving forward. And to our mayor, to pick up on your comment that yes, we're not private sector, but you know, when we're asking for the public to spend their hard-earned tax dollars and fund the budget that we're approving, I think it's totally reasonable to ask that we see how every penny is being spent.
Any other comments or questions at this time, councillors? Councillor Cressman?
So I guess what I'm hearing is I almost hear two parts to this: expectation and implementation. And I see the expectation, I would argue, I think is, and again, until we vote, we don't know, the expectation is that this would be where we wanted to end up. But the implementation may be contingent on as we get the new treasurer in place and him aware of any updates we need in software and staffing. Because it really comes, my experience with running a set of books is that you got to have the software that is able, and you have to be able to post it in the proper, the expenses in the proper manner. And I'm not aware, and I'm not aware of what type of software we have here. But if there's, hopefully you get comfortable with a set of software, and if there's updates in that software over time. To be honest, I was extremely surprised that the quarterly budget was in the confirmatory bylaw, and it was up, and none of us asked for it to be pulled out. And I went through it and I thought, boy, that's always what we did at board meetings. You yanked the quarterly budget out, compared it against the year-to-dates, against what the expectations were, and you had that information to say, are we on track or we're not on track? And I didn't pull it out, so maybe I'm as much at fault as my fellow councillors. I asked our previous treasurer about some things on it without pulling it out, with giving a little attitude. But I think that should be on us as regular practice, that we have that on a quarterly budget. We pull it out, compare the actual year-to-dates against the projected year-to-dates, and we know whether we're going off base on any of the spending, and we have an idea of whether we're online, because as I said previously in a budget conversation, I was not happy with the fact that we were off our budget last year significantly. And I think that all came out of reserves, and that's not a practice that we want to continue. Last year, meaning 2022, and 2023, we appear to be much more. We have a budgetary surplus, as you know, provisionally at year to date. So I think those are pieces that we need to be on top of on a routine matter, because I think, anyhow, enough said.
Very good. Thank you, Councillor Cressman. Councillor Martin.
Through you, Mayor Salonen, I'm not sure that I will be voting in favor of this motion. It's not because I'm against transparency. I think transparency is important. I'm more concerned about the process. Right now, it feels like an us versus them, and that's not a process that I want to contribute to. I'd rather see us working together as a team between council and staff. I don't believe that we're in the financial position we're in because people have misspent money. I do appreciate the staff that we've had and the hard work that they've done. I think part of it is looking at the chart and seeing that in the years ago with inflation, our tax increase was below inflation. And I think that was one of the reasons that we're in the position that we're in today. So I just want to state that publicly. I'm not against transparency, but I'm concerned about the process.
Any other questions or comments at this time, councillors? Okay, seeing none, I'll call the vote. All those, Councillor Dunstall?
Can you tell me exactly what we're voting for right now?
So this is Councillor Sadhu's motion as
As it
amended.
stands.
It is as amended because it did remove the very last part of the sentence saying, and to report back to council on feasibility and changes. Sorry, any changes encountered and the proposed timeline of these changes has been removed.
Thank you.
Councillor Cressman?
So again, for me to vote in favor of this, I understand this saying, report back to council with when this can be implemented. This is our intent, is that be it finally resolved that the administration is directed to implement these changes in preparation for the 2025 budget?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yes, that is currently what is on the table. All right, any other questions or comments at this time? Okay, seeing none. All those in favor? All those opposed? And that is carried. On to announcements. We have coming up in February is Black History Month. And this theme for 2024 is Black Excellence, a heritage to celebrate, a future to build. The Wilmot branches of the Waterloo Region Library have prepared some reading lists to get ready for Black History Month, which you can get more information at our Baden, New Hamburg, or New Dundee branches, as well as there is a free family event hosted by the Caribbean Canadian Association of Waterloo that's taking place at the Ken Sealing Museum in Waterloo on Sunday, February the 4th from 11:30 a.m. until 5 p.m. You can register on Eventbrite. And Wilmot will be promoting events and other information related to Black History Month, as well as we are currently trying to finalize a few other events that will be promoted on our Wilmot website. I'd also like to announce that Wilmot Heritage Day is back. And so the Heritage, Wilmot, and Castle Kilbride Advisory Committee are proud to present Heritage Day 2024, which is celebrating Wilmot's heritage. The free event is taking place on Saturday, February the 17th from 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. at the New Dundee Community Centre. Food is available for purchase, so come on and check it out. CBC show Ghosting at the Castle. In September, a CBC film crew came to Castle Kilbride to shoot an episode of a new series called Ghosting with Luke Hutchie and Matthew Finlan. Ghosting follows a host on a quest to discover if Canada's spookiest places are truly haunted. You can catch the episode with Castle Kilbride now on CBC Gem or when it airs on CBC TV in the spring. Funny enough, we were talking about the ghost on Saturday at lunch, and the ghost seemed to be playing some tricks on staff afterwards. I believe some missing highlighters and other items. So I'm curious to see what Ghosting found about our resident ghost over here. And then lastly, I wanted to announce the Reader's Choice Award for Aquatics. The Wilmot Recreation Complex received a platinum status in the Waterloo Region Record Reader's Choice Awards for 2023. And I understand that the aquatics team is one of the winning groups. So the Learn to Swim program provides a great service to our community, which we already know, but it's always wonderful that our staff get great accolades through the Region of Waterloo Records Reader's Choice. So congratulations. And does anybody else have announcements this evening? Okay, seeing none. The confirmatory bylaw is attached to the agenda. The recommendation is that it be read a first, second, and third time and finally passed in open council. Moved by Councillor Cressman, seconded by Councillor Martin. All those in favor? That carries unanimously. And adjournment. May I have a mover? Moved by Councillor Cressman, seconded by Councillor Martin. All those in favor? Have a great evening.